Day one of Ravens OTAs is in the books. We got our first look at DeAndre Hopkins in a Ravens uniform out there on the field. We also got some Zay Flowers updates to go over, Odafe Oweh, and the Ravens preseason schedule is now official, so we're covering all that and more in today's episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. So the Ravens just finished day one of OTAs, and it was closed to media, so not a lot of reporter information, not a lot of highlights out there. But good news is tomorrow is open to media. Only one practice a week is open to the media. So tomorrow we're going to hear from players. We're going to hear from John Harbaugh. We're going to get a lot of practice highlights. There'll be a lot more content out there. But they did have OTAs today. It's just kind of behind closed doors. You know, the Ravens are only going to put out whatever they want to put out. But we did get to see DeAndre Hopkins in a Ravens uniform running a drill. And it's just cool to see him day one out there at OTAs. OTAs are voluntary. You know, a lot of veterans don't show up to OTAs, especially early. You know, in previous years, even Lamar Jackson doesn't show up right away to OTAs. You know, that first day's meetings and just kind of like a light workout, and they're not doing a lot of serious stuff. It does progress throughout OTAs, but day one's day one. But DeAndre Hopkins is already there. That shows me that he's locked in, not only to get work in for himself, but also build rapport with his teammates and build a connection, you know, in this offense so that he can kind of hit the ground running and really have a role in this offense. And I am still curious, what exactly does that role look like? How involved is DeAndre Hopkins? I would assume that he's going to be a red zone threat, a jump ball guy in the end zone. I think that he's going to be a third down contested catch guy. You know, you need to make the big play. You need the conversion, and everybody's kind of covered. But you can still throw it to a guy like DeAndre Hopkins because he can go up and get it. You know, I know he's older. He's definitely lost some speed and burst. There's no doubt about it. But he's not a bad player. I still think he brings a ton to the table with his mind, with his catching ability. His catching ability is not worse. You know, he still has an incredible catch radius and great hands and a lot of football experience and knowledge, most importantly. This guy understands the game. He understands route running. You know, he's probably the most intelligent route runner that the Ravens have had maybe ever, but definitely in a long time. You know, I think he can create his own space without speed. You know, he can really assess the defense while he's running his route and run a route to get himself open that might not be the route that he's called. And it doesn't mean that he's not going to listen to the play call, but, you know, the greats use their freestyling ability to kind of go out there and take advantage of the defense. I don't think he's going to light up the stat sheet this year. There's just too many mouths to feed, to be honest with you. It's not that DeAndre Hopkins couldn't do it if he was put into a role. You know, if maybe we got injuries one week and Zay and Bateman might be down or something and DeAndre is the guy, like, I think he could go off that week. He could get 100 plus yards and a touchdown or two that week. But collectively, if we're a healthy team across the whole season, I don't think his stats are going to blow anyone away. Is he going to beat, you know, Odell's stats here? You know, I think he's in a very similar situation to what Odell was. They're different players, but I just mean from a stat standpoint, I think DeAndre Hopkins is a little bit more in that ballpark. Odell played 14 games for us. He had 64 targets, 35 catches, 565 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He did have 16.1 yards per catch. I don't see DeAndre Hopkins having 16 yards per catch, but I think he could put up 500 yards, and I think he could surpass 3 touchdowns. You know, I could see him having 6 touchdowns and 500 to 600 yards. I think that that's very reasonable. I do think he's going to be involved, and I think he's going to be involved in a meaningful way. You know, it's not going to be a volume game for him. He's not going to be getting 8 catches a game, but the 1 or 2 or 3 catches that he does get moves the chains or scores that red zone touchdown that we need. And I just think he's going to be a big play guy, a big moment guy when we need that big moment, someone that we can rely on. He's going to be a welcomed addition in that regard. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited that he's here. I wish, obviously, it was, 5, 6, 7 years earlier when he was really, really in his prime and the best receiver in the league, but it doesn't matter. I always welcome a vet of this caliber. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is not only going to make everyone else in that room around him better with his knowledge and experience, but he's also still got some juice left in the tank, man. He can provide a lot of value to the Ravens offense and Lamar Jackson. So I'm excited, happy to see him out there on day one of OTAs. And sticking with the wide receivers, we got some Zay Flowers news today. He has switched agencies and is now being represented by Patrick Whitesell's new sports agency, Win Sports Group. This comes about a year before Zay is going to be deep into either contract negotiations for an extension or playing the fifth-year option game. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. Ideally, we keep Zay Flowers and just extend him next offseason, which would be the earliest possible time that we could extend him. So Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum this year were eligible for their fifth-year options next year and eligible for extensions. Zay Flowers will be in that position next offseason. So are we going to pick up his fifth-year option for 2027 next year? I don't know. That's going to be very expensive. I mean, right now, the wide receiver fifth-year option for next year is $24 million, but that's going to go up. So it'll be higher than that. And I don't know exactly what Zay is going to command. I mean, he's definitely going to be 20+ million, I would imagine, especially if he has a great year this year. So I do think Zay's about to get paid within the next 2 years, and moving agencies a season before all that's about to start makes sense. He obviously either didn't love his old representation or sees a better opportunity with this agency. So it is interesting that Zay Flowers is making these moves right now. And if the Ravens did extend him, I'm hoping they extend him, by the way. I know their formula over the entire history of the franchise has been pay receivers as little as possible. Whether that's an older vet like Odell, which we paid Odell quite a bit actually, but usually the older veteran receivers don't get paid a ton. Steve Smith, DeAndre Hopkins that we just signed, or if we do sign our own guys, it's always for cheap deals like we did with Bateman or bringing back Tylan Wallace, or there's an ample amount of guys that we've re-signed over the years, but we've never re-signed a receiver to a second contract that's like the big deal, like a 20+ million, like a Zay Flowers deal that he's going to command. We've never done that. So it'll be super interesting next season to see if they do pay up for Zay Flowers and extend him, which I'm hoping they do. I feel like out of all their receivers that they've drafted over the years, Zay is the most deserving. He's the first Pro Bowl receiver. So, I mean, obviously that tells you probably why they weren't giving out a bunch of second contracts is they just weren't good enough. The Ravens don't really overpay for guys that aren't great. You'll see them keep a lot of the greats and let everyone else who's really good, they'll still just let them walk. And Zay Flowers, I don't know if he's an all-time great. That's too early to say that, but I'm just saying in Ravens history at wide receiver, yes, he is an all-time franchise great wide receiver already. And I feel like his connection with Lamar and just what he brings to the team, I feel like he's going to be someone that we should keep around and try to get extended as soon as possible so that we can keep that deal a little lower. And I think it benefits both situations. Zay is going to want an extension next offseason where he gets paid and also has 4 or 5 years of security. And then the team also locks a star receiver up for 4 or 5 years and gets him a little bit cheaper than if you play the option game and just wait a year or two. Because, yeah, they could pick up Zay's fifth-year option, but you can't manipulate that number. So that's going to be a $25+ million cap hit in 2027. You can't manipulate it. You have to pay that. And then the price just continues to go up year after year. So it just makes the most sense to try and get an extension done next offseason. So I'm really hoping that's what happens. But either way, Zay switched agencies right ahead of this new deal that he's about to get. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And speaking of contracts, Odafe Oweh has been working his face off this season. and is about to get paid next offseason. There's no doubt in my mind. I think that this is going to be his best season yet. He's improved year after year, and I was critical of Odafe Oweh, as a lot of Ravens fans were early in his career, because he's a first-round pick, man. You know, you draft a first-round pass rusher, and it takes 4 years to get that 10-sack season and really, really start producing. You know, it can be frustrating in moments where he was almost getting to the quarterback so many different times. I mean, the athleticism's always been undeniable, but he just wasn't always packaging it together, especially in big moments. But last year, we saw Odafe's best, and I think this year you're definitely going to see better than that. Everything we heard when we drafted him initially, that he's going to take some time and he's kind of a raw, super athletic prospect, that really did play out. You know, it was a slow climb, but regardless, Odafe Oweh's here, man. I think that he's going to explode even more this year, and in that contract year, Ravens history shows that their pass rusher goes off and gets priced out of Baltimore. It's happened so many times. I'm not saying that we won't re-sign Oweh. There's a piece of me that thinks he's going to price himself out of Baltimore, though. And if we can find a way to afford all these contracts, Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson extension, if we can pay everyone and keep Oweh, absolutely, man. Like, I want Odafe Oweh on this team. I'm just thinking, and based off history, that in a contract year, a Ravens pass rusher who's consistently getting better year after year. We saw this with Za'Darius Smith. We saw this with Matt Judon and Ellerbe back in the day. I mean, it's just so many guys that were on the rise, playing more and more and more. Their role was expanding. And then, boom, contract year. You know, Odafe's going for 12-plus sacks this year and is an absolute force. So I think he's about to get paid. It could price him out of Baltimore, but that doesn't hurt this season. You know, we're trying to win a Super Bowl right now, right? Like, yeah, I'm a lifetime fan, so I'm always kind of peeking ahead at, oh, does this make sense for 2026, or what makes sense long term? I'm definitely thinking about those things, but at the end of the day, he's on this team this year locked in. And if he has his best season of his career, that is only going to benefit the Ravens defense and the Ravens team as a whole. You know, that is going to lift this entire team if Odafe Oweh can't be stopped out there on the edge. And then we get a lot of juice from Mike Green, too, that comes in. I mean, the edge room is rounded out pretty well right now. And I think Odafe Oweh is going to be the leader of that room this year. I think he's going to lead the room in production. And that's okay. You know, if it prices him out of Baltimore and they don't want to pay him next year, that does suck. But I'll take a dominant Odafe Oweh season this year if it means that can help us get to the Super Bowl. And the final thing I wanted to highlight today is the preseason is officially announced and scheduled with date and time. So we got the Colts first Thursday night, August 7th at 7 o'clock in Baltimore. And then we have 2 road games. Week 2 would be at Dallas, Saturday night, August 16th. And then week 3 is going to be in Washington, which is close by, but technically is a road game, Saturday, August 23rd at noon. The preseason's a little less interesting now that a lot of teams don't play their starters, but I love even watching it for the depth guys. You know, that's why I'm so into OTAs and minicamp and training camp and all that, because the depth guys build out the rest of the roster. We know what we're getting from Lamar Jackson. You know, we know what we're getting from Derrick Henry. I don't necessarily need to see what they're doing. It's always exciting to watch them play, but I know what they're going to bring. So the preseason's more for watching the rest of the roster, watching the roster battles, who's going to make the team. So I'll be tuned in for all of it, man. I'll be here to bring you guys the updates and just giving my thoughts on everything. But that's it for today. We'll have a lot more OTAs content tomorrow. We'll hear from some guys. We'll have press clippings. We'll have highlights. But let me know what you're thinking about everything that we talked about. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. The Flock Rundown. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.